Okay, so let's get started, ladies and gentlemen. Let's not delay any longer. So for those of you that haven't been to a TELCoP this year, or even if you have, I guess, welcome to the TELCoP for June 2023. I think we've already had a couple this year, and this one is exciting because we have some external to CQ University special guests, which we do on occasion. And this all started because I met Keith at Ascolite in 2022, and he told me about the Digital Skills Hub, and I said, that sounds really exciting. You should come and talk to our staff about that. And he graciously agreed, yes, I'll do that, and I'll bring along a friend too in Kristy. And so we're going to get an opportunity to talk to them a little bit about their Digital Skills Hub and what it actually is and what it actually means. Before we do that, I'll do the usual sort of quick intro to the TELCoP and what it is. The TELCoP is the Technology Enhanced Learning Community of Practice. And the three coordinators, the three champions for the TELCoP are myself, Robert Vanderburg and Daryl Clare. I'm going to start, as we always do, by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on and paying respect to elders past, present, and emerging. And as I always say, because CQ University is such a diverse university, this could be all sorts of different places depending on where you are. And so feel free to type in the chat what the traditional lands are that you're on. And of course, Keith and Kristy, when we get to you, you can tell us where you are as well if you'd like, or type it in the chat. I am on the Gold Coast, and so I am in the Ugambeh nation at the moment. There's actually many clans, and so I think I'm in the Kuminberi clan of the Ugambeh nation here on the Gold Coast. But of course, if you were in Brisbane, which is where my campus is, you would be the Turrbal or the Jagera people's lands. So this is a little bit of blah blah about what the TELCoP is. I think everybody knows what the TELCoP is at this point. Really, it's focused on this idea of technology enhanced learning, and this idea that all the learning that we can do can be enhanced by technology. And that's why I was so excited to hear a little bit about this Digital Skills Hub at University of Wollongong. I left this slide in there because last time it was worth reminding everybody that all of the episodes are available on YouTube. So if you don't you didn't see something live, if you want to review what we talked about, then all of the episodes are uploaded to YouTube. I still haven't changed that picture of Robert from his. I just think it summarizes Robert really well. But, you know, eventually I'm sure he'll browbeat me into changing that picture. But Keith and Kristy, don't worry. These days I tend to put the sort of the title slide up as the picture. So yeah, feel free to go to that website, and if you'd like, you can subscribe, and then you'll get all of the notifications as I put new episodes up. What did they say on those YouTube videos? Subscribe and ring the little bell. Isn't that what they say? Yeah, so go ahead and do that. And just quickly, this is, as I mentioned to you, the people that run the TELCoP. Robert is here today. He's going to be moderating today. I'll be asking some questions from Keith and Kristy. And then Robert will be moderating the chat. If you haven't been to a TELCoP before, then the way that it basically works is that for most of them, we do a sort of an interview style format. And then if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat, and Robert will collate them all together, and he'll put his hand up occasionally as we're talking, and maybe ask a question on behalf of the audience, or sometimes on behalf of Robert if something kind of catches his interest. So I won't read the bio. I've read Robert's bio lots, and I'm sure most of you know me as well. If not, you're getting to know me pretty quickly, as it were. And then our third champion is Daryl Clare, who you would have met at the last TELCoP because he did a boot camp for us at the last TELCoP, which everybody was really excited about. The recording of that boot camp is now on YouTube as well, if you want to go back to the YouTube channel. But by far and away, our special guests, the people that we're here to see, are Keith Brophy and Kristy Newton from the University of Wollongong. They've done a great job there writing a bio for us of what they're doing. And really, what I'm interested in talking to them about is this Digital Skills Hub. But of course, if you read the bio, you can see that they are very involved in the library and that process of information sharing that the library does at the University of Wollongong. And so I'm sure they would welcome questions around those kinds of ideas as well. So usually this is where I throw in a silly photo of somebody that I found, like last week, Daryl and Jim and I as the three amigos. I couldn't find any silly photos of Keith and Kristy. I don't know them that well, so I don't have access to those photos. And so I just threw in this really cool photo of University of Wollongong. And I assume that Keith and Kristy, they work somewhere in one of these top offices, right? Yeah, that's in the executive space. Yeah. So I'm sure they'll correct me. I just love this photo. I was like, wow, that's fancy, good marketing, right? So I'm going to stop sharing now, and I'm going to hand over to Keith and Kristy. But we're sort of doing sort of an interview format, and so I think I've made it pretty clear that the first question I'm going to ask is for them to tell us a little bit about what the Digital Skills Hub at University of Wollongong is and what it does. And I'll hand that to whoever wants to take it away.
Want to go ahead with that, Kristy?
Sure, I can talk about this till the cows come home. So my role at UoW Library is the Digital Literacies Coordinator. So the Digital Skills Hub is one of my primary projects, and that's what's brought me to the meeting here today. And the reason we created the Digital Skills Hub is because in 2019, student surveys indicated to us that students recognise digital skills as being important for their future careers and for their time at university, but they didn't feel like they were getting them while they were here doing their uni degrees. So the portfolio that Keith and I are a part of, which is the Deputy Vice Chancellor Education portfolio, they took on board a strategic sort of imperative to really try and enhance student digital skills and embed those opportunities for students to develop them while they're here at university. I think the easiest way to tell you about the Digital Skills Hub is to show you. So I'm going to share my screen quickly and just give you a bit of a tour. Feel free to interrupt with questions at any point. I'm quite happy to be interrupted as I go. So you should now be able to see a page that says Digital Skills Hub. Michael, can you be? Yes, excellent. So we built the Digital Skills Hub in the SpringShare LibGuide software, but we've branded it so that it just looks like one of our University of Wollongong pages. So this doesn't look like a typical LibGuide, but that's the architecture that we've built it on, just for context for everybody. And while the library is really centrally involved in driving it out, it's not a library project per se. It's very collaborative with us, other professional units like Learning, Teaching and Curriculum, who do a lot of the online pedagogy and things like that, and a whole bunch of different professional support staff. So you'll see a whole lot of references to other units in here as well. Now you can see that the hub has a little chat box that's popped out at the side here. That's just a little proactive thing to say to students, oh, if you need help right now, they can jump on and they can chat to us. And that goes into our existing chat channels. But basically, when they get to the hub, we wanted to contextualize them and give them a place to land. So this first section here talks to them about what digital skills are. Now, I know what I mean when I say digital skills or digital literacies or digital capabilities or digital fluency, but a student might not use that kind of language. So this section just helps them have a bit of a context around what it is that they're here for and what they can expect from this site. There's a little video, which I won't play, but you can chase it up in your own time, and just a short summation of what the Digital Skills Hub offers for them as a student. And then last year, we actually redesigned the layout of the site. It used to be laid out slightly differently, but because user-centered design or human-centered design is something that's quite a guiding principle of our project, we wanted to really give students the opportunity to choose their own adventure as to how they navigated through the hub. So we know that some students will come to university with really high digital skills. They're already really digital savvy. They're using lots of different kinds of tech. They're thinking about what it means to participate in digital spaces, whereas others might be much more at the beginning of that learning journey. They're a bit less confident. They're maybe a bit overwhelmed by it. And then there's everyone in between those two poles as well. So these pathways that we've embedded for them give students a chance to kind of see what they want to get out of the hub and hopefully get some benefit that way. So the first one is the chance to evaluate their skills and get a personalised report. And this utilises the JISC discovery tool. So JISC, if you've not heard of them, UK-based organisation, really well-researched stuff on digital capabilities. And they've designed a discovery tool that you go in, you answer a series of multiple choice questions and some sliding scale, and then it pops out a personalised report saying, here's where you're strong, here's where you've got room to develop, here's some next steps you might want to take, and then connects them to support resources as well. We've actually been able to integrate some UoW curated resources as part of that. So that's bringing that local contacts back in for students who complete it. And it's a really cool service. It's a subscription-based service, and it takes a little bit to navigate around. So I won't give you too much of a tour of that, but you're welcome to jump in and have a look if you're interested further. The second way that people can navigate the hub is to jump in and just ask a quick question. So we know that sometimes people will be just wanting to find out, how do I build a pivot table? Where do I find a place to print my document? You know, there could be any number of just quick reference digital questions that they have. So they can click on this tile here. It's actually going to bump them down to a page just further down the site. They've got the opportunity to type their questions in there. If one's already been asked in that field, it'll come up and they can click on it, or they can click and submit the question as well. We've also included the latest digital skills FAQs and the popular ones just for reference for people who might want to see what's being asked frequently. Oh, and thanks, Keith. Keith just shared the link to the hub in the chat, so you can jump in and have a look at that, anyone who would like to. The third pathway is recently introduced as of this year, and it's where we've allowed access to LinkedIn Learning. This came about because we did a bunch of stakeholder consultation at the end of last year. And what we heard time and time again was that students really needed help with specific digital skills. So how do I do particular functions in Excel or in Adobe or in SPSS? How do I do project management? How do I learn more about my digital communication style? We didn't have the capacity to create bespoke resources on all of this and keep them all up to date. But we knew that LinkedIn Learning offered this kind of support in a way that was really well designed, really well maintained. It's got recognized providers. So we put in a business case to extend our institutional subscription and allow students access to it as well. Previously, it had just been staff. So they can go in here, and if they click on this tile, they'll see that there are 6 playlists or learning paths that have been designed around the digital capability areas laid out in the JISC framework. Each of these link into a LinkedIn learning path. So when they click through there, they can go in and they can just navigate through as they would with any other kind of LinkedIn Learning resource. The fourth way that people can interact with this site is to dive in and just understand a bit more about digital skills and digital behaviours. So this is coming back to that point I made earlier, where we know that the language that we use, we know what that means, but students don't always see how it relates to them and their own experience and skill development. So if they were to jump into this tile, it's opening up another subpage of the site where it lays out those 6 capability categories, and they can jump into any of those and see a bit of an overview of what that capability area refers to. So what sort of things are included, how it relates to their time at university, and then how it might relate to their time after they graduate in their professional lives. We link to some resources that are UoW specific resources that can be supportive for them in their learning there. We've also embedded those learning paths from LinkedIn Learning that I referenced, and then it digs into the more granular aspects of what this capability area might refer to. So this one's all around digital learning. So it's things like using those digital learning resources, using learning apps or services, using digital reflection tools as part of their study. But then it's also things like having an understanding of the opportunities and challenges involved in learning online. So there's a really popular misconception that digital skills means using digital tools, being able to use computers well. But as many of you, I'm sure, are aware, it's all that contextual understanding is actually really important as well. So being an effective digital citizen and understanding how to be quite autonomous in those spaces. Just jumping back to the homepage, we've recently integrated a new guide to support student use of generative AI and ChatGPT. Obviously, a real hot button sort of topic for a lot of people, particularly in higher education. So I'll just give you a quick tour of that. We've got these 8 steps that we want students to think about when they're using things like generative AI tools. And it's everything from understanding how they work, to developing good prompts, to thinking about how to be transparent when they actually have used them in assessments, and being able to do things like cite it correctly. This is a guide that we think will continue to evolve quite frequently because it's such a fast-moving space. So we plan to integrate things like a news feed and things like that. But it just will help students keep on top of that sort of context that they need about using generative AI. And Michael, I just saw your comment about getting in trouble for using the word citizen. It's interesting, isn't it? But it is about that sort of participatory experience in digital spaces, which is why I quite like it. Again, we've embedded some of those features of the hub back in here so they can search the knowledge base. And then the final point that I was going to show you is when you go back to the hub page, we've connected students to those other kinds of help services that might support their digital skill development. One thing that was a guiding principle in designing this site was that we knew there was a lot of support already available at UoW. So the library was doing some, we had a lot of different professional units doing some, but that wasn't really clearly articulated for students. And so the onus was all on them to figure out, who do I ask for help? What kind of help does each unit deliver, and try and figure out where to go. So one of the purposes of the hub is to help tie all of that together. So they just think, I have a need to do with my digital skills. They can come here, and what we hope is that they'll be able to find the answers to that. So we've got an institutional knowledge base here that they can search. The Learning Co-op is a service we have that provides a lot of peer support around academic skills, and there's a few like different units that feed into that. We've got a direct contact for the library because we do a lot of, library specific assistance, and then the same for IT support for all those hardware, software kind of queries. They've just got a little opportunity to give us some feedback. We're always inviting students to give us that feedback and say, how can we make this better? Because we are taking a very human-centered approach to this, and we want students to say, hey, I really wish it had X, and then we can try and figure out how to integrate that. Robert, such an interesting question. Why is it not a digital makerspace? Okay, so we previously did have a digital makerspace on Wollongong Uni at our library, and it was quite grounded in a lot of the physical technologies that they have in those spaces. So the things that you would typically expect, like 3D printers and laser cutters and computers with design software, there was virtual reality stuff. And that was something that during COVID, we just found wasn't really sustainable, because we had obviously capacity limits like everyone did. There was a lot of restrictions around how we could interact in those spaces. And the staff that we had involved there, we had to pull them into additional projects as well. So funding also, as with every university, is always a thing. So we were relying on year-to-year funding through things like the students' funding. Yes, it was a technology makerspace.
I think he's pitching this idea. Why not drag the students into the library? I think that's kind of where he's going, right? Even not so much the 3D print, but yeah, almost.
No, I guess where I'm
to
going,
learn these skills.
Like, a makerspace is just a place students can go to learn and interact, and it isn't monitored. I mean, you can get help, but it isn't like it's run by any individual. And, we all want to make all these things different things, and so we can have our own words. But in reality, I don't see how this is not a digital makerspace, right? Because students go in, they use it as they see, they interact what they want, they have access to it, right? It's just you can get a chat, but no one's monitoring it. It's very much a digital versus, I get a technological makerspace has to be in a location to get the actual devices and that technology. But why not in a nebulous area, but a digital makerspace where students go into that place? And it's fine to call it a hub, but I'm just saying, we're just saying synonyms in a sense, where
Yeah, I think it maybe is that understanding of a term. I think when students hear about a makerspace, they think of a physical space that they can go in and have a 3D printer there. But as you say, it's synonymous with it. It's the hub, digital makerspace. I guess the other side of it as well is that we started seeing other makerspaces starting up across campus, like in faculties and in our innovation campus, the photo you had earlier on, Michael. So there were a number of makerspaces coming about, and that was also affected our decision in kind of retiring that space. And then
I get the marketing of it, right? I'm totally on, right? Every culture of every place has a market that those students or people interact with. But if we argue philosophically, it's basically, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, but where I came from, a hub would be where you hang out. It would totally be more personable, right? Much more a food location type place. It was the hub of the place. So, but every culture I totally allow in the sense of how you choose to define your places in any place individually to your culture. I don't think there's any, but when we start to talk about what is this entity philosophically, it's definitely a makerspace where people just go and interact and be.
I think space is good. One of the things that got me when I was talking to Keith at Ascolite, which I kind of want to build on, and I sort of mentioned it when I mentioned the word citizen, right? I get in trouble for using the word citizen because I think it's got these kind of negative undertones, right? And I never think of it that way. I use it the way that Kristy does, a member of a community, I guess, somebody that, understands that world, the social norms of that world. So digital citizen is somebody that understands digital. I've gotten in trouble, so I've sort of backed away from using it. I sort of talk about, holistic digital skills or holistic digital capabilities or something, but Kristy's again right in that everybody kind of defines that slightly differently. And I when I talked to Keith at Ascolite, he said JISC, which I know, and JISC is quite broad and includes those concepts of well-being and identity and things like that. Why did you guys decide? Maybe you can talk to us a little bit about what the students were saying beforehand. You mentioned that this is built on the back of this knowledge that students didn't have these skills. And so why did you decide that JISC and that more holistic idea was more appropriate for you? And I've written here, what's your philosophy of student learning? That's very sort of airy-fairy, but maybe more practically, why did you decide JISC and that more holistic view was the right view?
I was thinking about this in the lead up to the session today, and thank you for sharing those questions just to get us a chance to get our head around it. I don't have a clearly articulated philosophy of student learning, but I think if I did, it would be around meeting people where they are. And I think that's from the background I come from as a human-centered design advocate, recognizing that everyone has unique needs. And that's why a tool like JISC was really appealing, because it did cater for people to start from the position that they were in. It doesn't necessarily lay out a static set of skills and say, you must have all of these to be at this level. It just says, okay, you're going to have strengths in some areas and development opportunities in others. And so really just looking at how we can, digital skills can be intimidating for people. People can find a real value judgment around it. And so we wanted to be able to make that okay, like make it so that people can go, cool, yeah, I have some stuff to learn. I'm really good at this other stuff, but I've got some stuff I want to learn, and have the hub be something that can help them there.
I like that value judgment about digital skills. Robert, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, so it's an analogy to the question. Like, one of the struggles I have is like, I prepare students for the land type. It's a test in the School of Education that students have to take. One component of it is reading skills, right? And the students who fail that test, one of the reasons they tend to fail is because they don't follow the instructions properly that are written for them to read, right? And so when the proctor gets there, they're in a distance situation. The proctor says, you weren't supposed to have this here. I didn't know. He goes, it was written out in the instructions, right? But obviously if a person doesn't read well. So then that's the paradigm I get caught up in. Like, how do I help them if they can't read? I always wonder, library skills are always interesting to me, and digital skills emulate it, right? People that are good at library skills, go to the library, never talk to the librarian, just do it. People that are not good at library skills, don't go to the library. So you go,
yeah.
How do you get them? Like, how do you get some, like, I would probably not go to a digital hub space because I would just Google. I would already know like a way to find those things. Like, it weirds me out, all my friends that don't like Google how to use Moodle, because all the answers are on YouTube on how to do everything in Moodle, how to do anything you want to do in Moodle, but they always call TESAC, you know what I mean? And like, I just Google at YouTube and that's why I know how to write program in Moodle, because you just look it up.
It's so true. It's so true. I think it's a similar challenge that we have with those people who need the library's help but don't come in because they don't come in and interact with us, to the people who maybe need the help of something like the Digital Skills Hub but they don't interact with it. It's all about selling the value proposition. And like, I'm not into marketing. I don't mean selling it in that way, but I mean articulating where that value lies for people and having them go, oh, okay, yeah, cool. That actually sounds like something that's really appealing and valuable to me, and then getting that little hook. So one of the ways we're doing that with the hub at the moment is really just doing lots of stakeholder consultation. So I've been going to heaps of faculty meetings and talking to the staff there, getting them to work with their students. We've recently done a pilot with a foundational education subject that's been really cool, where the lecturer encouraged them to use it as part of their coursework and identify areas that they could build on using that discovery tool that they then used in their next assessment task. And we've been getting some lovely feedback filtering in through that, which I'm still kind of working through as well. So yeah, it's so much of it is about language. Like so much of it is about saying, where is this valuable to you? And then being able to paint a picture of how that might work for people.
We did get it added to every Moodle site as well.
We did, correct.
Kind of get that visibility. So for those students who may not normally go do that Google, it was right there in their subject. And then we also ran a competition to promote the Skills Hub as well. So to try and get that interest there and draw them in with the chance of winning a voucher or something like that. So that promotion and getting those students that actually may really need the Skills Hub, that is like a constant thought, and we're figuring out how to do that best.
Awesome. Just a reminder, ladies and gentlemen, if you do have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat and Robert will relay them for us. Or alternatively, the group's relatively small, so if you just want to stick your hand up and ask, that's fine too. I was looking, first and foremost, I was looking in the room to see if anyone here was from TASEC that fainted when Robert said people should Google it instead. There wasn't anyone, I didn't see anyone in there, but I don't know, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I'm not sure. We've already sort of thrown offside the guys from IT. So let's see if we can throw the academics offside as well, right? And get involved in that. Why would you, without getting too political, actually, I'm making jokes, but let's try not to get too political, but why would this belong to the library, do you think, Keith and Kristy? Why not belong to the faculty? Why not get, Keith mentions putting it in each individual Moodle site. Why not refer this back to the faculty or some other area? Why is this something that lives in the library, do you think?
I guess it's hard to not get too political. Some of this did come about because there were these identified gaps, and it did come to us in a slightly indirect way from that student feedback that they had identified the gap. I guess it's kind of the space that the library takes. I sometimes see the library as being that glue between faculty. We've got learning, teaching, and curriculum, a lot of different stakeholders and units that we can kind of fit in between those spaces. And I guess from some of the great work that Kristy had done already on digital skills and digital capabilities, there was a definite alignment there. So when this project came up, I think the library was kind of targeted to run with it. But again, it was, we try and promote that it's a shared activity, and this is a shared, like across faculty and those other units, that it's not just the library kind of driving this. But yeah, it definitely utilized Kristy's skills in this space. And I guess that was another part of it, that this was turned around in quite a short time, I think maybe 6 or 8 weeks, reusing some of those tools like LibGuides and the information and resources that we already had to bring it together and get something set up before the start of session. So it was quite an agile approach. And again, that kind of fit with how the library operates.
That's a good diplomatic answer. You academics are all just so busy. We wanted to, I like that, Keith. That's a good diplomatic answer. Kristy, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, just to expand on Kate's point, that it really did build on an existing body of work that the library had been pretty centrally involved in. So I worked in partnership with a lot of the professional units since about 2016 on looking at how we can develop student digital capabilities and staff, but looking at digital capabilities as an extension of the work that libraries already do in things like information literacy. So that's our bread and butter in libraries, is how do we get people to work with information, whereas the way that information has shifted with everything being so digital and the world being so integrated into digital spaces, it felt like a very natural fit. And a lot of libraries, and I'm sure you've got folks at CQ Library who are doing work in this space as well, it's just a really natural complement to the work that we've already been doing for a long time.
So actually that leads really well into another question. I noticed Randa's got a question in the chat, which I'll ask you in a second, or Rob might ask you in a second, but That I did have a question a little further along where I was going to say, hey, what do you think libraries are? Where do you think libraries are positioned in 2023? I mean, I guess I visualize a library, and my parents went to Trinity College in Ireland, and it's a beautiful library with all the books and all the little spaces you can sit in, and one of those ancient universities. But I guess these days, maybe that's not what we expect from a library in 2023. And you've kind of led into that a little bit already, Kristy, when you've said that library was positioned for information literacy as opposed to sort of dusty books and big shelves. How do you see a library in 2023 fitting into the academy, fitting into what we do in the university sector?
Oh, look, I love a good dusty book as much as the next person. I really, really do. But I do think that libraries have a really natural fit in the digital world as well. And the reason that we do is because that's where information now is. So libraries have always been about information rather than formats. So originally the format was the book, and it's a favorite format of mine, but it's no longer the favorite format of all of the people.
Don't forget microfiche.
I know. So,
oh my gosh.
There's some great formats there.
I remember, like, I don't want to date myself, but I remember.
It's like magic, right? It's like,
Yes,
look at all this stuff.
like,
yeah.
It's always been since the beginning a form of tech, not a form of just book. Even it's a whole language, just like programming, learning the Dewey Decimal System, which kids today have
totally
no clue about. I mean, it was a whole language system of communication that was very different. And then just geographically understanding, like, I don't know how your guys' university systems, but my library was 5 floors. Like what letters were on what floor, what section, like this was all a library maze. It is not that different than a digital source media now. I think we think of libraries as that one floor we used to go to when we were kids. But university libraries have always been these complex places with study hubs and all kinds of different things.
I think as well, I'm not a librarian. I've got an IT background, but it seems to me that there is more of a crossover with IT and library activities these days, that there are non-librarians going into the library, and there's a mix of those skills now. Like the types of things that you do in the library, like maker spaces and those types of things. I think there's a real crossover and acknowledgement, I guess, that information literacy and digital literacy is coming together in the space. So I think it's really interesting. I think the libraries are really some of the exciting places in the academy, as you're saying, Michael.
And he's not just saying that because Kristy's listening. Robert's got his hand up there. I think he's going to ask.
Mine's the Rena question, and she was wondering what challenges you've had having one stance on ChatGPT and maybe other areas having a different stance in the workplace, because it definitely seems like not everybody has accepted at a university the same view. So what issues or concerns have you seen with the way you're dealing with it and the other cultures at your university?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think early on in the piece, I was going to a lot of forums where there was a lot of fear-driven questions happening. So a lot of people saying, how do we stop the students using this? This is going to be the end of everything. Really kind of just like freaking out a little bit about this is going to mean, like, what it would mean for academic integrity, what it would mean for all sorts of things. And I also have a healthy level of skepticism around how much we should be allowing ChatGPT to integrate into the learning process. But having said that, the cat's well and truly out of the bag. It's going to be used. People are going to use it, both academics, all kinds of staff, students. So for me, it then became really firmly around critical literacies and how we empower students with the critical literacies that they need to understand what this technology does. So if you can make an analogy to, and I know there's probably folks in this room who remember when Google first came on the scene, and it changed everything. Like, it really did change the way that we consumed knowledge, the way we searched for knowledge. This is, you can draw an analogy between those two things. So there was a lot of fear in the library space that, now that there's Google, will libraries still be relevant? Of course we're still relevant, because our core business is about helping people make sense of masses of information and collect it and organize it and navigate through it. Same with ChatGPT.
Yeah,
It's
same with
pulling in
Wikipedia.
information.
When Wikipedia
Yeah,
came out,
exactly.
like I remember like professors and teachers, you cannot use Wikipedia as a source. It is not, you know, like it can be altered. Like the Wikipedia, and there's like research to show that Wikipedia is equally as wrong as any encyclopedia for different reasons. For different reasons, they're both equally holding false information in it. So yeah,
And
I'm just
this is where digital literacies comes in, right? Because if you start thinking about things like media literacies, what does that actually entail? It's understanding how knowledge is created and consumed and promoted to people. Where does bias sit as part of that? So when you're talking about things like ChatGPT, what are those models being trained on? Like, what are those sort of data sets they're drawing their information from? How does that reflect the bias of the people that have designed the technology? So yeah, there's this whole beautiful complex picture that you have to kind of consider. But to answer your original question, I did see a lot of fear-based stuff when I first started going to forums about this. And a lot of it then became more about, punitive isn't quite the right word, but it's like, how do we contain this? How do we make sure that it's really quantified and how we can make it really transparent, which, you know, the transparency is good. But I think it really is around extending people's understanding of how this technology works and how they can interact with it positively while considering it within the context of the broader amount of information that's available to them out there.
Yeah, I think it's a current big pedagogy / policy problem.
Totally.
I don't think an administrator, a vice chancellor, a president can say ChatGPT can be used, but a pedagogy person can. And that's where it gets into this muddiness with how do we do this? Because, you know, you can't be the head of a university and say, yes, our students use ChatGPT to write their papers. You can't say that, right? And a policy won't allow that. But a pedagogy can say, how can we use ChatGPT to help students learn, right? And that's a whole muddy thing. And in a librarian, I always think you guys are amazing because it's hard for me. I was an English teacher, right? So English teachers are like, usually the librarians are just usually ex-English teachers in America.
I'm an ex-English major, so there you go.
It's kind of the movement. Very at a high school, you know, at a university, you went to school for library science, but at a high school, you were an English teacher and you just moved over. So we were always really close. And I've always saw the library as the third space. And that's a big problem for me.
Yes.
Because here we talk about learning design or education design, whichever term is used at a university, that as the third space. And I've always thought of library as the third space because it is this medium between students, faculty, and administration, where you know, you're managing these things and the students are working with you. And I've always thought that you guys as the third space. We should call them the fourth or the fifth space, but you guys were
how many spaces are there? Like, yeah.
Right. But I always saw the library as that third space that we all try to interact with.
Yeah, I think the library is fortunate in the way that we can be relatively agnostic. So we're not part of a faculty. So we work with all faculties, we work with all staff, we work with all students. And so that kind of openness is really woven into our value proposition. And I think that fits nicely into that library as third place kind of position.
So if somebody wants to move into your space, and I guess you could each have an answer to this one because Keith, he just acknowledged he's more of an IT guy that happens to work in the library. If they want to move into that space, what would your advice be, just out of interest? Move into the library space or the IT guy that works in that library space?
I'll let you take this one, Keith. I'm interested.
I guess there was a talk actually at Theta, I think, on this question. But the way I see it, the library space does have this IT element to it more and more. Like we're working with APIs, working with systems where like you need to automate some of the processes. And I think having that IT type background can certainly help. I still don't understand all the terminology around library management systems, but we still look after it and I think it's running okay. But yeah, I think taking that IT experience and understanding, it can definitely help. And I don't think you necessarily need that specific library understanding to work in the area. I think the crossover works really well. Like our team is called Digital Environment and we look after some of the library systems, but we're also, I guess, if you use that term, digital transformation, digital literacies in the staff, we've got a nice crossover of skills in terms of how people can learn in these areas, and then also applying some of the digital solutions. So like it might be building a script that automates users going into the library system, or it might be running digital skills hub as we do in our team.
Awesome. So let's ask you a couple of silly, sort of more broad questions. We are the technology enhanced learning community practice. So my first sort of broader question is, cast your mind back, imagine back when you were a kid and however many years ago, and you had an anticipation that in 2023, universities or the library would look in a particular way. What technology did you expect you'd be using, or that students would be using at university, and maybe more specifically in the library today, and what are they using? I guess I'm probably looking for something that you expected they'd be using that they weren't, but I'll leave it up to you guys.
I mean, hoverboards come to mind, obviously. Like, where's my hoverboard? I think that I thought things like iPads would be a much bigger deal than they were. So if I cast my mind back to childhood, I was a massive Inspector Gadget fan. I don't know if anyone else here watched this, but like there was a character in that who had this computer book that she took everywhere, and she could research everything on it, and it was amazing. It's literally an iPad. Like, it did get invented sometime in the future, but then I don't feel like they've taken off in the way that I thought they might for students using them. So I thought it would be something that was very mobile, and so I guess smartphones have become that, right? Because it's in everyone's pockets. It's always there. But yeah, I think I saw students consuming information differently to what they do. And what seems to have happened in reality is they're looking often for really easily digestible, bite-sized information. And so that's where things like mobile accessibility really come in.
That short sharps thing is much more than we thought it would be, right? They're short.
Totally.
That lack of attention span that we all accuse the kids of having is true, right? But you're right. Also, no paperless office, no paperless library.
That's where I disagree with the kids. Like you find my wife and I joke with this all the time. You find a movie that's under an hour and 30 minutes, under 4 hour and 45 minutes. That kids
I've heard you say this before.
They're 3 hours long. I can't handle, my attention span can't handle a 3-hour movie. And
but they're double screening. They're on their phone the whole time. They
go to the movie and watch it. Like, I've sat in a movie, and they are so. I find this generation so interesting, right? Because I went to a movie theater at 16. I didn't know who the director was. I watched the movie. I walked out. I thought it was a good movie. My son goes to the movie. He knows who owns the rights to this name superhero. He knows who's directing it and why that director backed out, or the other director backed out. They know so much information, and they keep researching it. They don't just trust the first source when it comes to the way they consume. And I really had this eye open to me when we saw the 2 Spider-Mans ago, or the first Spider-Man after COVID, right? And I'm sitting in the theater, and I thought, oh, foolishly, it's just my kid who does this. And every person, all these kids in this theater, they're gasping at the same parts. They know, they've all done the same research to know that that guy is in the CW version of the show. And when he shows up, he was, and everybody, like, it's just this conscious interaction with the medium. I never saw that happening. I just like never saw students being out. But now the problem is, we as people, we don't see them researching what we want them to. So we think they don't do it. If you find their worlds, they are constantly consuming and interacting with information in their world in ways that we never really did. Like, we never researched our toys. We just played with them. My son is into Warhammer, and he knows everything about everybody, and whenever like a media thing comes out and say Mark Cavill does Warhammer, he's like, no, he doesn't. He doesn't. He tells me everything he does, what he does, how this is not real. It's just a marketing ploy. He's not even in this. I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. I see a quick thing and I consume it. But in his domain, he doesn't consume it the way we do. Now, in my domain, he consumes it quickly. I think that's what I think digital literacy and a hub like this can do for us is start to teach us old people how they consume what they consume, and how they consume what we consume, how we consume what we consume, how we consume what they consume, so that we cannot make them enemies, and realize that we all consume what we like really well. We all choose to not consume something we're not interested in really well.
So true.
You know what I mean? And stop blaming the youth like there's something wrong with them. They just don't consume what we want them to consume, which is basically the definition of youth, right? Like,
yeah, right.
Like in the 80s, like our parents were pissed at us because we didn't listen to what they did, or like what they, you know what I mean? It's just the whole reference. Like, I don't know.
No, I love it. I love it. We're 45 minutes in. You're like, stop being grumpy old men. That's your basic message, I think, which I don't disagree with.
I think in academia, the library has been the best location for not being grumpy old men. They really change quicker than anybody else, because my memory of a library since first grade had computers in. Like, we had computers in. I'm old too. And they were instantly, there was a computer section in the library. They were instantly adapting way quicker than the classroom was, interacting with, allowing, I mean, I remember when I taught high school that during lunch, certain kids would be in the library doing computer things, and the librarian would be supporting this location for digital interaction. And we're talking 20, 30 years ago now. I'm old.
Yep.
So that's why I always think of you as a third space, because you don't have to adhere to an ideology like an English teacher must, or like a math teacher must, so we must read the Shakespeare classics. That's what we must do, right? You get to be like, Harry Potter rocks, and have a Harry Potter Thursday, you know what I mean, in the library. And I really struggle with that, but I always love that about you guys.
There you go. Any thoughts on a piece of technology, Keith? And then we'll, I might hand over to Robert to do the TELCoP 10 if he wants to. It's up to you.
A piece of technology. I think my final year project in uni was virtual Trinity College, actually, in VRML.
Oh, there you go.
I thought there'd be more virtual or augmented technologies out there, and maybe with the new Apple, what is it, Vision Pro Plus, that might be the way things are going. But yeah, I think I thought there'd be more of that, not Meta or anything in that space, but maybe just more of that virtual interaction, I guess. Yeah,
we all blew past 2015 when we were all supposed to be in Back to the Future with the hoverboards that Kristy mentioned and the goggles and none of it happened. I looked at it in 2015 and went, this is not what Marty McFly promised me 30 years ago. Yeah, I agree.
I think it was because I was an academic English teacher. I never got into that. Like, my son was like, oh, Ready Player One. I go, it's never happening, Beto. He goes, why? I go, because the kids that want to do sports don't want to be in VR. They want to be outside. And the kids who want to play video games don't want to move. They don't want to get up and run, or they'd be outside. Like, so I always knew that VR is not going to work because it means moving. You know, it means you got to get, like, the kids that play video games, they want to touch buttons and quickly and fast and expediently and accuracy and every separation. The real gamers don't even play consoles because an average player on a computer can beat a console player that's the best in the world because it's faster, quicker, precise, and techie. You know what I mean? So I knew that stuff was never really going to work because you either do sports or you don't. And once you go to the VR world, you got to move. And that's not.
Well, it's all about spatial computing, man. That's apparent, as Keith said, right? Apple Vision Pro, spatial computing. It's we've got about 10 minutes left, so I want to give us a chance to run through the TELCoP 10. So the way the TELCoP 10 works is, I don't know if you've ever seen Stephen Colbert do the Colbert questionnaire, right? It's supposed to be 10 things that we ask that you answer fairly quickly, right? With just a couple of words. And I'm going to give, do you want to do it, Robert? Do you want your TELCoP 10's your thing?
Yeah, my thing. But it didn't start with Stephen Colbert, though. It started
No.
It's you got to go to the original source as a library.
I knew you would. I knew you'd tell them the original one.
They're going to log in on us because it's an alteration from the actor's, which he altered from another person. But right? So we ask the questions and each of you answer, yours best you can. But question one is, what is your favorite technology word?
Petabyte. I can't tell you why. I just like the sound of it in my mouth.
I think I read it a couple of days ago, but API is for AI.
Okay. What is your least favorite technology word?
Deploy, because it's actually military and it keeps getting applied to technology all the time and it shouldn't be.
Maybe XML, or back to my developer days, enterprise Java beans. Did never hear those again.
What technology turns you on?
I'm thinking of a suitable for work response to this one. Streaming music, because I have all of the music of the world at my fingertips.
I'd go with probably the obvious one, Gen AI, but it also scares me a lot as well.
What technology turns you off?
Apple Vision Pro.
I'd probably say blockchain, just because every time I hear it, it's just a marketing ploy to get somebody involved to spend
I'll just go to the
money.
next one. People getting blockchain degrees. I don't understand that. But what technology, sound, or noise do you love?
The whistling sound that my electric car makes.
This will probably come into the next one, but the Mac startup sound.
What technology, sound, or noise do you hate?
The Windows
When you
startup
have
sound.
an error and it just goes.
No. Mine is. I hated that. What is your favorite technology slang word?
I can't think of one.
I have to come back on that one.
Yeah.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Marine biologist.
Maybe a writer, an author.
What profession would you not like to do?
Accountancy.
Yeah, the same.
If technology heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
You have unlimited storage.
As you would say, it's pronounced GIF.
The definitive pronunciation of the graphic format that is spelled GIF. That's like the answer to life, the universe, and everything, but in technology terms.
Kristy, the reason you don't like your least favorite technology word, deploy, is the reason I struggle with digital citizenship, because the rhetoric of citizenship is huge, right? And what it means to be a citizen. And I think they use that term too freely when they mean digital participation.
Sure.
But the concept of being I very rarely meet anybody online that's actually citizen acting. They're much more abusive and there is no medium of protection or system for citizenships in this place, And I think it's hard to go to a kid who, by the way, doesn't get to be a citizen until they're 18 and say you should be a digital citizen at 16 or 14 and ask them how to manage that without any assistance. That's where I struggle with the citizen term versus the rhetoric behind. I had to take a test to become an Australian citizen. There's all this stuff with citizenship and what that means and the rhetoric behind it. And then to sort of grab it and go, this is something we're going to just tell kids you can become now. Like that there's more. It takes time to be a citizen, different than, because they're already digital interactors. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it is all that digital participation and being active and autonomous for sure.
Yeah.
That's it. Okay, well, I can see everybody's on their way out. Thank you so much, Keith and Kristy. It's been a really great conversation. There are a couple of questions we skipped over there, but that's okay. I think we got to the meat of it. You did get a couple of little requests in there about the